talk about clearing out a room.
Was it something I said? You think?
Yeah. Wow. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You can proceed with it.
Okay. Good afternoon, Council President Clark and members of the City Council. I am Bridget Collins Greenwald, Commissioner of Public Property. It is a pleasure to appear before City Council today in support of Public Property's Fiscal Year 20 budget request. As you have our written testimony, which highlights the many accomplishments and plans of the department, I would only like to add one thing that is not in the written testimony, and that is about our team. The Department of Public Property is full of employees that are extremely dedicated to providing quality services, and I would like to acknowledge them publicly for their commitment to public service. I've said it before, and I will continue to say, I am proud to work in a place where the employees show such genuine sense of care and commitment to their profession. We juggle a wide variety of tasks and work requests all the time. In addition to working on our core mission of responsibly serving the city's workforce and community by providing quality facilities, we consistently provide service that goes way beyond the everyday work we do to maintain, acquire, and maintain facilities. DPP staff are the unsung heroes of the city, as I've said before. Thank you for indulging me, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. A couple quick questions. Talk to me about the increased utility consumption. There's an additional request for funding, and I know some years ago we did a retrofit of the triplex or quadplex.
So we continue to work with the Office of Sustainability. They're actually the ones who are charged with the utility consumption and whatnot. It comes into our budget. So we have retrofitted the triplex, like you said. We're retrofitting a few fire stations right now. I know Sustainability has a project going on with the Art Museum. So they're all things that fall under their purview. We might do the work with them or contract with them, but it actually falls under their purview to decide which facilities we're actually going to go for.
So I can't get that answer today?
You can't get it from me, but I could get it for you from Sustainability.
Okay.
I don't think
it's kind of important.
No, they're not here. I can definitely get you that answer, though.
Yeah, they probably should have been here.
I don't know if they maybe.
Well, the reason I'm asking because I know in the retrofit and this whole conversation around ESCOs and reduction of utility costs, using that reduction to pay debt service on borrowings for retrofit publicly owned buildings. I know we're doing that in the school district now. We just embarked on, I think, 3, 4, 5 possible school buildings. And the city initiated that some years ago. And I'm trying to get a sense of the debt service payments based on savings. But if we're increasing our funding, that clearly could present a problem.
I actually can't respond to that, but I can definitely talk to Adam and his group and get you that.
All right. Ms. Wallace, could you at some point, or you want to answer it? I can.
Oh, she said, do you want her to call him and see if he can come?
How long? I guess the whole question is how long is it going to take? Doesn't seem.
Okay, good. You want me to answer? Here we go. Say your name.
Good afternoon, Council President and members of Council. My name is Thomas McDade. I am Deputy Chief of Staff for the Department of Public Property. Adam McGallico from the Office of Sustainability did plan on coming and had a meeting at 12:30, which he had to attend. So I know that doesn't do us any good here, but we will get whatever answers that you need.
What could be more important than budget hearings? Are you kidding? Yeah. All right. So at some point, that's it.
We'll get you that information.
We'll take care of that.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
Councilman, are you going to be asking questions about the police headquarters? I was going to defer to you. I don't want to get in your space. I know that's an important one to you. I know you were. I'm going to jump to something else. City Hall. Place, I've been working here a long time, a number of us, And the whole issue with respects to safety has always been troubling for a number of reasons. Every time you see a TV show, and I hope I'm not putting something in somebody's mind where, unfortunately, somebody kind of comes in and there's been a number of suggestions that people may want to do bodily harm to people in the building. Can you talk to me about where we are with our security plan?
Sure.
That's the obvious reason, somewhat important.
Absolutely, and we hear your concerns, and we're on board with you.
Yeah,
So,
that's right, you work here too, so.
yeah, I'm up here too, So if you recall, last year, we had a budget request on our budget, which you guys passed, and we actually started our security implementation, so this fiscal year. So if you come in on the west side, the west portal, where the jurors come in, a majority of our visitors come in on the northeast side, or they come in on the visitor side on the west portal. So it's the jurors and anyone going to the Register of Wills, which gets a lot of traffic. So we have all the safety precautions set up there now. There are turnstiles, there are magnetometers. You have to scan in anyone that's coming.
So you have a magnetometer at the
It's at the west.
mayor's entrance?
Yep. It's at the mayor's entrance and it's at the west portal. So if you were coming in for jury duty, instead of coming in the northwest side, like how you come in, like where you and I come in,
Right.
you would come in through the portal side. So you would come off of Dilworth, come in through the courtyard, and right there we have the same setup right there. So we started with the west. We moved on to the northeast, which is the mayor's entrance side. We just did that about a month and a half ago. So we're analyzing that, making sure that's working all right, working out some kinks. It seems to be working out well. Then the next step is the northwest side, where you come up underground. So that's a vulnerability we're
Right.
aware of. So that will be the next step. It's visitors first, and then phase 2 was always employees second. So then everything else should be shored up, and then we would start with the employees. And we've worked with your office on this too, doing a whole education piece so everyone will know what to expect. So you just don't come in one day and everything changes.
And the folks that we have at the locations, the security forces, I think we have, I don't know what.
We have
What company is that?
It's Scotland Yard is the contracted company, and then we have members of the sheriff's staff that actually are there.
But
So we
not
have a
at the
combination.
doors.
We
I'm
actually
talking about the doors that, frankly, somebody hold the door for me, and people like sometimes hold the door for
tailgating,
them, and the
yep.
person doesn't really have any idea or whatever. So what the protocol for the individuals that are at the locations, at those doors, say across from the Ritz, which is not utilized that frequently, but
so
are
what
they
is
supposed to stop everybody?
the protocol is that the guards that are there, and actually, in answer to your question, if any of them are city workers, I think we have about 4 municipal guards, and everyone else is contracted out. So yes, the protocol is if you see someone tailgating, that's what it's called, you are to stop that person and say, do you have access to the city? Now, we know with some of the employees, and it's just a given that certain people, like where you and I walk in, we all know Ellis
Right.
is wonderful down there, and he knows,
Right.
he knows Matt, he knows you, he knows me when you walk in. So, but he stops, if you ever observe him, he stops people all day long that he said, do you have a pass? No, you don't. Super friendly, shows them where to go on the northeast side and tells them what they have to do. So that's the protocol, is you are supposed to stop someone that doesn't have a swipe card to get in.
Right. And is there a live camera at those entrances to monitor whatever activity is happening?
There are cameras there, but no, they're not monitored per se. Like, we go back and review them. You know what I mean? There's no one sitting live watching them, but we have access to them.
City Hall, shouldn't we have like somebody looking at all the cameras? Is that a significant challenge for us?
You know what? I would have to get back to you on that. We did have a whole assessment done by Homeland Security, and it wasn't one of the suggestions that they made, but I can bring it up. Me not being like a safety expert and them being the safety expert, they did not recommend that. But I can go back to
Why didn't they? They must not work in this building.
it. Just, I don't know why they didn't. They didn't know. So we can loop back around with them on that.
Yeah, that's...
They did do a full assessment of the whole building, though, and I think if we do all the steps that they want us to do to, that we're working towards to make the building safe, I think that they feel that that will be sufficient, because the south side doors, you wouldn't be able to get in that way. You would only be able to get out. Northwest would be taken care of, west is already taken care of, and northeast. You're pretty much buttoning up the whole building.
Okay. All right. So we have in the budget detail, $70,000 increase for bathroom monitors in the MSB concourse. What's that about?
So we are taking our lead from the library, the central library. We've had some incidents in the MSB where some of our customers have had some incidents in the public bathrooms down there in the MSB concourse, where you come in off of, where you come in off the subway. So we were trying to figure out what to do, and we thought about more guards, and we started working with Project Home, and they told us that actually what they do with the library is use these bathroom monitors. We contract with Project Home, and they select the people for us, and we put them down there. And it's actually, we just started March 5th, and it's been working tremendously so far.
Okay. So you mentioned Project Home. I guess you know what my next question is going to be. Hub of Hope. All right. Well-intentioned, much needed level of support. I even put it in my latest newsletter, cutting the ribbon, the whole 9 yards. But the bottom line is that it is presenting a problem, not only for the merchants, but the Carter has now become a location that has been somewhat challenging. I mean, some of the reports that are currently happening with KYW and other, they're real. I know Councilman Greenlee first made me aware of it some time ago. In terms of revisiting, and it's obviously the investment made for the actual Hub of Hope was extensive, and we really appreciate the people that have stepped to the plate. But it's essentially moved the challenges that were at the train station, and they're now over near the MSB, where folks walk from the MSB to go to the food areas and other areas. So the bottom line is we have a problem. In terms of public property, what's our role, and what are the discussions that are being had about dealing with that challenging problem?
Sure. So public property is part of a more holistic approach to what's going on down there in the concourse in general. The Hub of Hope has been, as you said, very successful. The people that go into the hub and use it they get tremendous services, and it's performing a very worthwhile function. And as you said, what's happening is people are congregating outside the hub and into the rest of the concourse. So we're one of a group that's working with SEPTA Transit, the police department, Department of Homeland Security within the police department to actually come up with a strategy to figure out what to do in the concourse. SEPTA has a few ideas about reconfiguring the concourse. The police department, if you've been down there lately in that area, there's been a much heavier presence down there to try to keep things moving along and try to keep things civil and whatnot. We realize it's a challenge. We're working really close with the Department of, or the Division of Health and Human Services in that group within the MDO to actually come up with a plan, this larger group to come up with a plan. But as for right now, we're on meeting and trying to figure out what to do. But right now, what's been happening is the heavier presence down there. These bathroom attendants were intended to actually stop the overflow from coming into the actual MSB itself and causing some issues. So now it's just a matter of what's being reconfigured on that other end of the concourse down where like the flower shop is and the food court and whatnot to try to get the issues that are going on down there resolved.
All right, so can you, because sometimes things need timeline, and who's in charge of it? Because at some point, somebody has to be in charge.
Yeah.
So who's driving the discussion and the solution in terms of?
So the MDO is driving the
MDO's office.
train.
All right, because I know Mr. Epps was here. He was actually the one that convinced me to.
Well, you and I went down there. Remember, you and I went down there not too long ago.
All right, so the MDO's office. So can you convey to them that we'd like to get in writing what the plan of action is to address all aspects of the challenges that we face. And actually, the after hours, because a lot of the issues relate to after hours, after the Hope is closed, then there's a whole nother set of challenges down there. People selling drugs and all that's real. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
smoking
I cut
K2
through
and
there, I
all the
know.
other stuff and
Yeah.
urinating. I mean, it's a mess. It's a hot mess down there right about now. All right. So can you convey to the MDO's office if you can get something to us in writing sooner than later?
Yep.
All right. Thank you. And one last question, and I'll pass it on to my colleague, Councilman Down. Starbucks. So on Dilworth Plaza.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right. So one day I'm up there with one of my colleagues. I'm up there actually at Mr. Christmas's office, and I'm looking out the window, and I said, "What's going on over there?" So we actually thought it was some new planters that were being put in place. You know, we had no idea, right? And come to find out that they were constructing a new building, i.e. a Starbucks on Dilworth Plaza. And during the course of the hearings to authorize the Center City District and Dilworth Plaza, it was always our understanding that any changes and additions or deletions from that was going to go through the appropriate protocol since the contract was authorized in City Council. So can you tell me what is the quote-unquote protocol in terms of a building being built on property that is leased by Center City District on City Hall Plaza?
Sure.
That's-
So as part of the lease with the Center City District for Dilworth, there's a provision in there where Center City District is able to raise revenue. The ice skating rink, the cafe, several other events that they have there when they rent the plaza out. So the sublease they have with the cafe that is there, this kiosk that's going up, this Starbucks one, is part of that lease. So that sublease with that cafe is what's actually going onto to the west side over there, selling Starbucks, from what I understand. So
It was a sublease to the master lease?
so the master lease gives them the permission, I guess, for lack of a better word, to raise revenue. So somehow when they raise revenue, they come back to this. They don't come back to the city per se. What they do is they have a system. So they'll put in like, okay, we're going to have, I don't know, the Best of Philly event. Just say that, for example. They put it in the MDO system, the permitting system. It gets permission that way to do any type of event. With anything that's going up, that's in addition to the lease to raise revenue, like they changed the operator at one point. If you remember, there was a different operator that operated that cafe when it first opened. Now there's a new one. All they have to do is come back to the city and get permission to actually just change that. There's not another mechanism to come back here.
From?
So they get permission from us for the planning, you know what I mean, for the structural stuff from public property. And then for the conceptual, it went through the mayor's office, I believe.
All right. So is it an amendment to the lease or?
No.
Because I don't remember that document.
No, it's part of the lease and the operating agreement that's within the lease. I came in at the tail end of this with the operating agreement, and I know it's in there, and I believe it's in the actual lease part, though, too, and it refers to the operating agreement, which is where this comes from.
Okay, so I want to look at that because was somewhat surprised that somebody can build a building on the City Hall sidewalk, basically, without any knowledge to most of us. Starbucks must be a great thing, but it was kind of nice to know that people would have been in the loop that actually signed off on the document.
Yeah, I can definitely get you a copy of the updated operating agreement. Well, it's not updated, the original one. If you don't have it, I'll just send it over to you.
Okay. All right. Chair recognizes Councilman Down.
Thank you, Council President. Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Good afternoon.
I have a few questions. I'll start out with the easier ones.
Thank you.
Sure. On page 11 of your departmental budget detail, it shows a line item of $35,400,000 under local non-government general fund money. Do you know what that is?
What page was that? I'm sorry.
Oh, page 11 of your departmental budget detail. There's a $35.4 million line item for local non-governmental general fund money.
Okay, it's, okay, I'm sorry, it's page 10 online for some reason. So that would be the sale of some city assets. So for instance, 500 South Broad Street, 11th and Reed, if we get that far into selling that in 2020. The family court building finally making settlement, the original family court building making settlement.
There were 3 buildings sold?
So no, there were several others. I was just giving you examples. So there would be.
But the total sale was 35 million of all these buildings?
There would be 35 million. This is an estimate. So it would be estimated $35 million in revenue based on the sale of those 3 buildings at least.
Can I get a list of the buildings sold and the value
Sure.
of those buildings
Yeah.
and the square footage? And
Absolutely.
did we have appraisals on those buildings when
Yes.
we sold them?
Yep.
I mean, the family court building's a big building, isn't it?
The older family court building, yes.
How many square feet is that building?
You know what? I have it in here. I don't know what's on my head, but hold on. I have it in here. Well, it mirrors the library, so hold on one second. Let me see. It should be one of our biggies. It's in here somewhere. Here we go. Gosh, you know what? It's not in here. It's the only one I don't have a square footage for
Okay.
some reason.
Would you say it's bigger or smaller or
Oh,
similar?
wait, here it is. Hold on. Family court, 18015. No, it just doesn't. It doesn't have the square footage. I'm sorry. Would I say it's bigger than what? I'm sorry.
Say an Inquirer building?
I don't think it's as big as the Inquirer building. The Inquirer building is like 466,000 square feet. I don't think it's as big as the Inquirer building. And it does have that historic designation, so there are different constraints on what you can do with it.
Just refresh my memory on the Inquirer building. What was the total value received on that sale?
The total cost of the lease or the total cost of the construction?
Let's say let's say both for now. So I want to see
So
what
the
the budget
total
is.
cost of the building itself, everything all in was 256 million.
Is that on track?
Yes, actually, we're about 25% right now, but it is well on track. I was just there a couple weeks ago.
We're not
looking
over
good.
budget.
No.
And what did we wind up at the end of the day? Wasn't there a number like 89 that got negotiated to 79 over the course of time of a value, which consisted of tax credits plus a purchase value?
There was a tax credit portion, and then there was the acquisition portion.
And if
Yeah.
I recall, it was originally 89 or 90, and we negotiated to maybe 80?
I want to say you're correct. I'd have to look that up. I didn't bring that information with me and
I'm
get it
pretty
from
sure
the
that's the
treasurer,
number.
but
Yeah.
that sounds about right.
Right. And is that 80, are you including that in the 256 million?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
that's all in the 256 million.
And are we paying rent right now for 400 North Broad?
We are paying rent right now. Yes.
How much are we paying in rent?
So we pay. Hold on, I do have that. Hold on. We're paying the rent is the cost of the construction is what we're paying. So hold on one second.
Are we paying rent to the current owner of the building?
We're not paying rent per se. Even though it's a lease, what we're paying off is the construction cost. So
we're not
that's
paying
how
any,
the rent is
we're not
structured.
paying any rent right now.
What's that?
We're not paying the owner any rent.
We're not paying them rent per se like you would pay a landlord where you're paying to be in the building. You're paying off the cost of the construction.
So he's probably building in the rent cost in the construction cost.
The construction costs are the construction costs were figured out based on how much it would actually cost to do the construction of the building with no extra rent going to him.
So we have the use of the building for how long without paying rent?
We will have the use of the building. So the treasurer's probably better off to answer this, but let me answer it the best I can. So after the building is complete, we will be in it for another 5 years that he will still be the owner, and then we will have the option to purchase. So I would say I think 9 years is the total.
So for 9 years, we don't pay any rent?
For 9 years, we pay off this construction
And you don't think the rent's factored into that construction fee or cost or overhead?
I don't, because the acquisition fee was a separate fee. That was still within that yeah, so that's why, no, I don't. I think this was really based on the construction cost.
Okay. And in 9 years, or whenever the time period is up, can you just briefly explain the process of how the city is going to, I guess, finalize this transaction?
The process, well, I can't speak for the treasurer or what we would have to do for any of the bond-related issues, but if we were going to, the normal process for us to purchase a property is we would negotiate, normally we would negotiate with the owner, which we don't have to do in this case because we have the purchase price, which is paying off the debt of the
Is the purchase
construction
price
loans.
and the acquisition cost set for today, or does it get reappraised in 7 or 8 years?
No, it's set. What we pay is what we've agreed to pay going forward. So even though I know the interest rate fluctuates, we have an agreement of what we will pay, and it can't exceed a certain amount. So if the building's worth like $1 billion in 9 years, we don't pay $1 billion. We pay still the construction. You know what I mean? The cost of the construction we put into it. So the normal process would be we would negotiate a price. In this case, it's set. And then we would come before council, and then we would, come before you guys, have it introduced, I guess, by the council president. It's in his district, and then go before the public property committee, and then hopefully vote it on as a whole.
So you're saying the total cost for the city for this building at the end of the day is $256 million?
Yes.
That includes the IT and all the other departments that are going in there?
So that IT was always a separate amount that was paid with 911 funds, so that wasn't included in there, but it's factored in. And I think that's it. That's all that's not factored in.
So the IT is not in the 256?
I do not believe that IT is in the 256. The IT for the building is in the 256. The IT specialty that they need for that 911 area is with the 911 funding within a separate pot, which it always was, because it's a different pot of money.
How much, do you know how much that is?
I do not, sorry.
Do you have any idea of what other items are not in the 256 that could be cost associated with this building?
Meaning if we put other entities in there,
Right.
Sure, we would add that on, and that could make sense to do that. We're going to have some spare room. As we said in the beginning, the tower floors will be open, so we'll have to figure out, as an administration, what we're putting in there, if it makes sense to put certain things in there, if it makes sense to move things out of rental properties or whatnot.
I know my time's up, but can I continue? It's okay. Thank you. So I just want to make sure I understand this, okay? When we were negotiating this, because I was in the room, I remember this little negotiation, we had in writing the ability to get a 3.75 19-year fixed rate loan from the seller to provide. In fact, I came across the paperwork on it. The city, for some reason, took an adjustable rate, like 4.05 or 6 or something like that. And having said that, rates have come down the last few months. Is there an opportunity, this may not be a question for you, but something for you to look into. Is there an opportunity for, I guess the seller took out the loan because we're leasing it from him, we're just paying the costs. Would it be an opportune time now, because rates have dipped down, treasury bonds are down, for us to look at refinancing that 4.07, because some of them are now in the high threes again, which is unusual that it happened. Does it make sense for us to look at that refinance now in advance? Because I can pretty much tell you in 5 or 6 years, I don't think rates will be this low. And if the rates are 5 or 6, it's going to cost us a lot more money to acquire this building. And one of the other things that we had tried to do, it was a year and a half ago, I think it was, our goal was to take out a 19-year fixed rate, fully amortizing loan so that we won't be here in 19 years, but at least the city would have this property paid off free and clear, okay? And we won't have to worry about the debt. And while we're doing all this interest and whatever, we're paying down the principal a bit, but we're still going to have to go out and take out a loan at that point and take out a 20-year loan 8 years from now. Whereas if we had done the 19-year, we would have had 9 or 10 years left on the loan and be done free and clear. That was the original goal. I realized that it raised the payments $3 or $4 million a year, but in the long run, financially, it was worth it. So that's why I want to look at refinancing it now.
Okay.
So this is a $256 million. I'm going to pivot to 46 and market it for a minute. I just want to make sure we borrowed $60 million. The interest payments are going to start, I think, in the next year or so.
I think so.
And we're going to pay about $4 million a year.
I believe that's what the rate, I mean, I could have to confirm that with the treasurer's office, but
Right.
that sounds
I
right.
think it's for like 10 or 12 years or something like that. Something in that range.
Sounds right, yes.
I know the total cost is $100 million. And of that money, the 60 million, I think we used 52 of it. I don't think we used 8. 4 million was the acquisition, 48 million was the improvement. So we used 52. So you could say that our costs maybe were 90 or 92 million, but we're selling that building for 10 million. So we're going to book an $80 million or $82 million taxpayer loss on the sale of that building, and we're going to incur $256 million if everything goes right on the purchase of the Inquirer building. Looking back, and I know you were probably here at that time, what did we learn to avoid this from happening again, what occurred at 46 and Market?
Let me think about that one for a second. What did we learn? So the 46 and Market property, I think probably what should have happened, and like you said, I wasn't there, so I don't want to disparage anyone that was, and I'm not trying to do that. I think what happened was once we started getting into that building, it wasn't equipped to fit everything that we needed, and it just wasn't. And we were going through the design process and value engineering, and then things started to come out. So it looked like the building would have pretty much paid for itself if you sold off all the other assets that could have been moved into there. And in actuality, that couldn't happen because you couldn't you couldn't move all the people from the health department into that building. You couldn't move all the people from 500 South Broad into that building. There just wasn't enough room. So then what started happening is started looking at the design again. And I think a lot of time was spent trying to reconfigure that site, try to like stick a round circle into a square peg kind of thing. That's what was happening. And it just didn't work out. And I think probably in reality, we should have maybe said back then, hold on, like what can actually fit in here and what makes sense? And maybe if that would have happened, we wouldn't have been so far along into the process.
So really what you're saying is due diligence.
Yes.
Before we acquired the property, we should have done a lot better job in the due diligence of what our expectations were to make sure that this investment would have handled those expectations.
Yes.
Okay. Separate question on this. Can you, not on that issue, something else, can you provide us with a copy of the Triplex Management Maintenance Agreement with JLL?
We're still in negotiations on that agreement, but when we have one, the contract, yes, we can provide you.
And on that topic, there were some minority contractors, I think, that were either cut out or eliminated. I don't know the whole story, but there was a bunch of issues around it. Have we engaged them in order to allow them to participate?
So we as an administration do not, we as public property, I shouldn't say as an administration, do not engage with the prime contractor on their subcontractors. But what happens is we steer our prime contractor that we're negotiating with to the OEO office, and they work with them.
Because the rumors I'm hearing, I don't know if it's true or false, is that there are Philadelphia companies that aren't getting the work versus companies outside of Philadelphia. And we all would rather see companies in our city get the work.
Yeah. And I will say that citizens of the city, so the same people that are working now are the same people that get interviewed to work, continue to work.
Okay. There's a list starting on page 62 of your budget detail, and it's a complete list of the properties that the city leases. Can you provide the details of square footage and the utilities for each of these properties?
Yes. Yep, I have that.
Okay. And another question, we're budgeting $1.2 million for warehousing new voting machines. We don't have the facilities for this?
We do not have facilities to house the current machines that we have and the ones that we would purchase at the same time. We just don't have the room for it.
So it's going to cost $1.2 million?
That's an estimate. We're actually still in the requirements, figuring out the requirements and figuring out what kind of space where we will go. So
we don't have any public property that's sitting vacant we could store it?
No, I wish we did, but we don't.
Okay. Next question is Philadelphia Code 21-2102, which deals with program-based budgeting, requires the departments determine the component costs of each function performed with city funding, such as fringe benefits, space rental, fleet costs, etc. Where in your budget detail can we find this information?
So the cost allocation plan, it's not in our budget. It's not in our budget. I believe it appears in the finance portion of the budget.
Well, it does require that each department determine those component costs.
I'd have to ask Anna if that's where it is, where the cap appears.
All right, let me go to the next question while she's coming up, save time. In the fiscal year 19 budget detail on page 66, it shows a $3.5 million payment to fleet management for 6930 Norwich Drive. In fiscal year 18, obligations that wasn't appropriated. You know what that payment is for?
So we purchased the property on Norwich Drive in anticipation of selling the property at 11th and Reed. So that's where fleet management's paint shop was. So we did a return on investment in that, and it made a lot more sense to move them out of the neighborhood, at 11th and Reed, which I'm sure makes sense.
Do you know what? So what do we sell Reed for?
We're still actually in the process. Actually, tomorrow I go and we actually look over some of the proposals that we got. So we have a competitive RFP out there on the
Are the
street.
sales in the price range of what we acquired or different?
So the sale minimum is based on an appraisals that we had done. So yeah, that will be higher than what we paid for the Norwich
Okay.
Drive. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
So Anna Adams, I'm the budget director. So the plan with program-based budgeting is that we will get to a point where we will allocate some of these other costs by program. It's really difficult to do with our current systems, to do that well. So we started off with fringe benefits, and eventually we're still having to get all the other departments into program-based budgeting. We'll get every department in by next fiscal year. In FY21, all the departments will then be incorporated. And our plan is then to start going through allocating fleet costs, public property costs, all of those things. We wanted to start off with fringe benefits. And so we've done a calculation by program, and you see that in each one, but it will take us some time to get there. But that is the plan. We want to get to a point where you can really then start seeing all of the costs. What Bridget was referring to was the cost allocation plan. So there is a sort of accounting puts this together, but there's a way that you can see all of the kind of the administrative services that support each department. It's not allocated by program. So our plan with program-based budgeting is we'll get it allocated by program, but that's a sort of a retroactive look at what should be allocated by each department, and that's done through the cost allocation plan.
So by next year, you think we'll have it down, Pat?
So, every department will be in by next year. That's the plan. We are really close. I mean, we really have just a handful of departments left. But we will get every department in, and we'll have we'll have all the fringe benefits allocated. It's a calculation that we do. But then eventually we really want to start getting to a point where you can really see all of the other costs that go into that program, so you can really see transparently what our costs are.
Okay, and one last question. And you know this because I voiced my opinion on the sale process of 46th and Market and the value we achieved. And I looked at the two appraisals that we had, and the land comps were $107 to $290 a foot, and we sold it for $17 a foot. Just the land, forget the building. Could you make a recommendation to us as to a better process of how to maximize value when we sell our assets in conjunction with whatever programs we want to incorporate? But clearly, in my mind, I did the math on the back of an envelope of that building. That building, if it's 75% filled with the TI, with everything, could be worth $20 million more than the cost of renovating it and the acquisition costs within 2 or 3 years. And I hate to see that. I'm happy for the owners who are going to buy it, but I hate to see the city lose this $80 or $82 million of our taxpayer money when that opportunity could have maybe been shared with us, or we could have gotten a higher price. So what I'm asking you to do is to look at our process, because I know a lot of people who don't want to bid on city property because it's too complicated. And it's a process, I get that. But if there's a way that we could look at it to streamline it, to attract more potential bidders in order for us to get a better price, we should look at that. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Again, the Office of Sustainability will be here at some point. All right, we want to make sure we want to talk about those utility costs. I want to thank you very much. Can, all right, I'm going to let that go for now.
Thank you.
Councilman, did you have one?
One more question for you. In Exhibit G, this is what I'm still trying to understand this. This is on North Broad Street, the Inquirer Building.
Gee, okay, I didn't.
The purchase fair market value calculation. I'm just going to tell you how it works for us, which concerns me. The fair market value purchase price for the purchase option will be determined based on upon the following formula. The price isn't determined yet according to this. The fair market value shall be an amount equal to the greater of the sum of the amount of the principal balance and accrued interest outstanding under the project financing, which is what you're talking about, as of the date the tenant consummates the closing, or the fair market value of the building as determined by an appraiser in connection with the tenant's providing of the option exercise notice. So there could be an appraisal. Here's what could happen. This whole corridor could blow up in value. And someone could make an appraisal that it's more than $256 million. And if it is, we're stuck with either not buying the building or paying the higher price.
So from what, I'm not sure exactly what you're looking at, or if that's the last updated one that you have, but I know in speaking with the treasurer that what we pay is absolutely the debt of the construction, so.
But to be fair, we'll look at Exhibit G, page 49.
Yeah, I don't have that with me, so let me
I just
just
wanna
look at
make
the
sure-
latest one I have.
Because I don't want to get into this situation in 7 or 8 years.
Yep,
I'd rather correct it now if we can go back and correct it now.
Yeah,
than
and
have it.
I know when they were in negotiations about that piece, it was to avoid that going.
Right.
Yeah, it was to
Oh,
avoid
just
that.
let us know then if you can.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yep.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you for your testimony. Yeah, we have fleet management is up next. We're gonna take like a 10-minute break.
from the school. Thank you.